everybody, I hope you're doing well and welcome to Michael's Matters. And of course, I'm Michael, and I'm really glad to have you all here joining in to watch these videos and to contribute in the comments and just be a part of the community. It's all pretty cool. Now, especially today, because it appears that we are on the verge of possibly getting some sort of reprieve from these astronomical gas prices that have been really just hammering our pocketbooks, our bank accounts, and our credit cards, and leading many Americans to struggle even more than usual. This is because at the state level here in California and a few other states, the governors, and here it's Governor Gavin Newsom, is proposing things like a gas rebate or gas checks, tax holidays, or even direct payments that are basically going to be stimulus checks of up to $350 per person paid directly to residents to help pay for the rising costs of gas. Now, also at the federal level, President Biden is giving a firm push to Congress to try to find ways to bring down the cost that Americans are paying at the gas station every time they fill up their car. On the federal level, the president is seeking to provide a temporary 90-day gas tax holiday, which would mean a pause on the tax that the federal government collects on every tank of gas and diesel, with the hope of putting additional money back into our pockets. And again, helping those Americans who are being hit hardest by these increased gas prices and inflation overall. So today, I want to talk about President Joe Biden's push for a temporary halt to the federal gas tax, as well as California's proposed $350 per person gas rebate checks that are going to get sent out in the fall, and whether any of these things will actually help the situation that we're in, and also how it panned out for those states that have already instituted things like rebates and gas tax holidays. Now, this is Michael's Matters, and before we get to it, if you like these videos, if you find them interesting, if you find them helpful, or if you at least find them useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when my newest and most informative videos get put up. Alright, so it's no secret to any of us who have been paying for our own gas this last year or so that the cost of gas has gone up to astronomical levels. I mean, in all honesty, I don't think I ever thought that gas would ever go over $5 a gallon, let alone to $6 or $7 or even higher that it's hit here in California recently. The reality is that basically nobody ever thought that gas would go this high, and a perfect example is that there is now concern about how gas stations could potentially cope with the price of gas on their signages if the gas ever gets to $10 or more, because they actually don't have enough spaces on the digital signs to actually display the full $10 amount, or anything over $10 per gallon. Ironically, it sort of feels like Y2K all over again. I don't know if you all remember that, but we all thought that basically the world is going to come to an end because computers didn't have a 2,000-year programming to it or something like that. I think that's how it was. But either way, gas right now is way, way higher than anybody thought it would ever be. And the nation is looking to our leaders, well, let me rephrase that, at least looking to politicians to do something. This is despite the fact that neither the Fed, the president, or even Congress have really much ability to quickly affect the price of oil or gas on their own. But again, this has not stopped President Biden, with the midterms looming right around the corner and Democrats facing a steep uphill climb to at least appear to be doing something. This last week, we have seen President Biden scramble to put together some sort of strategy to deal with these rising oil prices. He's done things like take trips to Saudi Arabia to meet with America's bête noire, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who was not really up on speaking terms with the U.S. until last week. He tapped the U.S. strategic oil reserves, which is something, but it has not really made a whole heap of difference at this point. And also, the president is even resorted to trying to browbeat American oil companies into stop being so greedy, which doesn't seem like a very effective strategy. But also doing at the same time trying to get them to produce more oil. So basically telling them, hey, you all need to make more oil, but also why don't you make less money? Again, not something that a lot of those companies are going to buy into. And again, who could blame the oil companies for not complying, since they have long memories? And they remember that over the last 3 years, candidate Biden and President Biden had both had their hearts set on completely dismantling the fossil fuel industry, which now they so desperately need. So that leaves one solution left, which is the last resort of all politicians, which is to turn to taxes. President Biden is now pushing Congress and state governments, for that matter, to temporarily halt the taxes that they're putting on each gallon of gas that gets pumped into our car. What this means in real terms is that, at least at the federal level, it would lower the cost of a gallon, at least by estimates of the White House, by 18.4 cents per gallon of petrol and 24.4 cents per gallon of diesel fuel. In theory, again, according to the White House, this would save drivers around $3 on a full tank of gas that would normally cost around $75 to fill up. The suspension of the gas tax would last a totality of 90 days, or 3 months, and is meant to be coupled with a state response or rebates, or maybe even a tax holiday from the state, of the portion that those states also put on top for gas as well. These numbers, they're going to vary from state to state because, states have different taxes on them, and even some states have additional taxes from cities like New York and LA that add taxes on top of whatever the federal and state taxes are every time we pump gas within the city limits. Now, according to some estimates, in the states that are willing to rescind their gas tax temporarily, coupled with the federal tax holiday, it would come out to about a 3.6% savings for drivers at the pump, which I know it doesn't sound like that much, and well, the reason is because it's actually not that much. All right, so obviously it's not going to have as big of a savings as potentially Biden would want. But one of the other big problems that the proposal has is it doesn't seem apparent that any of the congressional Democrats are on board with pausing the federal gas tax. That means that even if the legislation did come down the pipeline right now that would allow for a federal tax holiday, there is likely, at the moment, not enough votes on the Democratic side to even get it passed. Not even in the House, which is pretty strongly Democratic. So, in addition to the fact that if there is a federal tax holiday, it may not actually save us that money, and in addition to the fact that legislatively and politically it's not that popular, there are also a couple other potential reasons why this federal tax holiday on gas wouldn't be that great of a solution, and it may not solve the problem. The first and biggest problem is that the federal government doesn't actually have any control over how oil companies and gas stations price out their gas prices. This means that even if they were able to put a stop on the federal gas taxes for a temporary time period, there's nothing that is stopping the gas companies and gas stations to just pocket the additional money, as gas consumption would go up with the temporary cheaper gas. In fact, at the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School, a study found that at the state level tax holidays that have already been put in place, that only 58% to 87% of the savings from the tax would ever reach the consumers, depending on the state. So if we take those numbers and look on the low side of that, at 58% of 18.4 cents, that comes out to 10.73 cents. So basically for every $100 spent on gas, you'd be saving around $2 if we're being generous. So this is obviously not really enough to make a difference. Additionally, in states that already have had gas tax holidays, like in Connecticut, they found that only 9 cents of savings was afforded to their state's residents per gallon over their neighboring states who didn't have gas tax holidays. Another state that has paused the gas tax in June was New York. And they removed their 16-cent per gallon tax at the beginning of June, but as of right now, prices for gas have not really dropped that much within the month of June, as the demand continued to rise, but the supply has not been able to rise to match it. The other part of the problem is that even right now, only 15% of fuel prices are because of taxes. The other 60% comes from just the normal bottom line cost for crude oil, which has jumped up wildly over the last couple months. Now, to add insult to injury, the Bureau of Labor Statistics also had put out data that showed that only 4.5 cents out of every dollar spent by American households in April was actually spent on gasoline. So the picture is becoming more and more clear that President Biden is not likely going to be able to push Congress into doing a tax holiday for gas, and even if he did, it wouldn't amount to a hill of beans of good for those of us who are paying exorbitant amounts of money for gas on a daily basis. And the real problem seems to be overall inflation that is sapping the money out of our pockets from every direction. But the thing is that we just notice gas more because it's on billboards that we go and drive our car into every single day. Also, as a side note, and not a minor reason, but the reason that many members of Congress on the Democratic side, and probably Republican side too, are unwilling to do the tax holiday is because it's going to end up costing around $10 billion in federal revenue that was supposed to be used for infrastructures and roads and also for pet projects. So if the president's proposed tax holiday was ever to be implemented, it would mean that nearly a quarter of the $48 billion budget that's allotted for roads and bridges spending this year would straight up disappear. So obviously at the federal level, the gas tax holiday is probably going to be a non-starter. It's just something that the president can do to show that he's doing something, even if that something is actually nothing. But on the state level, there actually seems to be some impetus to do a couple things that could put some money into the pockets of residents. Luckily, at the moment, there is actually a litany of options from the state side that can be done to help bring down the cost of gas. So things like gas tax holidays on the state tax, state gas rebates, as well as gas direct payments. So basically think stimulus checks that are going to be sent out to drivers to help pay for gas that states are actually on the verge of maybe getting done. Now, the one I'm going to focus on today is that one that is here in California that's being proposed by Governor Gavin Newsom, which is in lieu of spending money on a tax holiday, he's going to propose to give out direct payments of up to $350 per person to Californians to help pay for their gas. Now, the current proposal as it sits is pretty simple. Rather than providing a tax holiday, which, by the way, here in California, we're going to have an increase in gas tax starting July 1st. That was already in the legislature to help deal with inflation. Of course, inflation for the state government, not inflation for us. But instead, they're going to provide payments of up to $350 to California residents in the fall, which happens to be just before midterm elections, to help pay for gas. At the moment, these $350 rebate checks would be sent out to Californians based on their income and household size, which means that for lower income households, they would receive a full $350 per person in their household. This would be for households who make less than $75,000 per year, and they get the full $350 amount. This income size actually will double for joint filing households, so that would be incomes up to $150,000 a year in income would be able to get the $350 as well. Also, this amount is going to continue to go down based on income. So it goes down to $250 per person if the yearly income is up to $125,000 or $250,000 for joint filers. And then lastly, it's tiered down to the lowest amount of $200 per person for a household who makes up to $250,000 a year for a single person or $500,000 for a double. Additionally, it's important to note that there is a state residency requirement for the rebate, meaning that you'd have to be a resident of the state of California to be able to get it, but there is no citizenship requirement to be able to get the rebate, at least not in the current wording. So now if we do a bit of math, if you have a family of 3, so that would be 2 parents and 1 child with an income that's less than $150,000 a year, so that's $75,000 times 2, then you'd be able to get a full $350 for each person in the household, or that would come out to an additional $1,050 in the fall. Not too bad for sure. Now, although the proposal has not yet passed, it seems to be moving quickly towards being implemented here in the state, and hopefully it does, because it'll mean additional money in the pockets of Californians who are struggling right now. So look, I think there were a few things going on here at the state and the federal level. First is at the federal level, the White House is between a rock and a hard place. With the amount of free money that is still sloshing around in the economy and the overheating job market, and sure, let's throw in the Putin price hike, inflation is running rampant and the cost of everything is going up. But most noticeably, the cost of gas is going up. The feds, Congress, even the White House, none of them at this point really have any power to change the increasing cost of gas, but they have to do something. So it totally makes sense that the one thing that the president is going to do is demand tax cuts and berate fossil fuel industries for being greedy. But ultimately, this is just one thing that he's doing so he can say, I actually did something, when in reality, he actually can't do anything. To make matters worse, the only solution that they can think of is putting more money into the hands of Americans, which is good in principle. I'm all for putting more money into the hands of Americans, but it might actually just make the inflation problem worse. On the state side, though, they're in the same boat, but they have a huge budget surplus from last year's copious amount of federal stimulus money and raging stock markets, the taxes that they got from that. But it appears that hard times, they might be ahead. And of course, they want to spend that money and give it back to the people. That's good. But once it's gone, there's no guarantee that next year it's going to be as good as these last 2 years have been. So, I mean, there's not really a great solution to it. And in fact, I don't even know what the solution is. But what I can tell you is that doing something just for the sake of doing something is almost as bad as doing nothing because you can't figure out what the best thing to do is. Now, this has been Michael's Matters, and I hope that you found this video interesting or helpful or at least useful. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when my newest and most informative videos get put up. So for Michael's Matters, I'm Michael, hoping that you take care of yourself, take care of others, and have a happy, healthy day.